back down. How about that? That got it? All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to Open Source AK47. My name is, well, that's not all that important, I guess, but I do want to introduce my companions up here. One is Dr. Buttstock, and of course this fellow over here is son of Pistol Grip, which actually is supposed to be my name, I believe. So, anyway, Dr. Buttstock is going to be participating in a very important way. He's going to be making an AK-47 right before your very eyes, proving that you only need to be able to walk upright and have opposable thumbs to create the greatest killing machine ever invented. And I'm sure he can do it. We'll get started in just a minute. I want to give you sort of a rundown of what we're going to talk about. I may try to talk sort of fast because I want to have a little bit of time at the end so you can ask questions or look at all these goodies that we've got up here, and don't want to feel like anybody has been shortchanged on what they want to find out about AK-47s today. We are going to talk about the whole variety of ways to make these go together. And why would somebody want to build an AK-47? Shoot deer? Okay. Well, actually, there's no serial numbers on these guns, and there's no paperwork on these guns, and you don't have to go through a background check to do it. So, and the main thing for me is that there's no government sticking their nose in what's going on right here. Okay, you can do it yourself and be proud of it, and it's legal to do. At least for right now, it's legal to do. So let's get started. I'm going to cover about 5 different areas, and I'll give you a quick rundown of those. We're going to talk about the history of the AK-47. We're going to talk a good bit about the legal matters of doing this. I don't want anyone to go home thinking that this is illegal. I also don't want anyone to go home thinking they can build one any way they want and it not be legal, because you certainly can build one and make it illegal. I want to ask a question of everyone. Is this for me? Okay, I'm in. What is it going to take to do it? And lastly, we're going to go through a pretty detailed, not too awfully detailed, steps of procedure to actually make one happen. So, you'll have to bear with me on using this microphone. I'm kind of new at this. We'll start out with a little bit of history on the AK-47. The AK could be called the original weapon of mass destruction. As a matter of fact, no weapon except maybe the atomic bomb has had a more profound effect on modern warfare. They're cheap to make, they're nearly indestructible, they're always functional, easy to learn to operate like no other weapon has been. This particular weapon can turn a farmer or a teacher or a citizen or a peasant or a ragtag group of towelheads into an effective killing machine. Nothing can do that faster than a crate full of AK-47s. Most of you probably know that Mikhail PhreakNIC was the inventor of the AK-47. He was about 30 years old when he did that. He was born in 1919. He worked as a tank commander in World War II and just felt drawn to this type of work. He was wounded in battle and was sent to a hospital. While he was there, he got to thinking about designing a new type of an assault weapon. Of course, at that time, the word assault weapon was not even in the lexicon. So he's about 30 years old. He made actually 3 guns, the AK-47 being his third, before he was truly successful. The first one really wasn't. It was more of a pistol type of a submachine gun. The second one was not accepted by the Russian army, but they did see in him some potential. So they actually gave him the opportunity to go and work at some of their armories and be a designer. So he was actually able to do that. He did create some other things. He created a little device that would count the number of rounds that a tank had fired, and some other little devices too. He was actually a tank commander in World War II. But in the second gun that beat him out in his quest for designing a weapon was the SKS. I'm sure many of you here are familiar with that gun, and it beat him out. And he went on to make some improvements. Some of his team that he had assembled there helped him to do that. And in 1949, the Russian military adopted the AK-47 pattern gun, which he had developed in 1947, and they adopted it in 1949. Since that time, over 70 million of these guns have been produced worldwide in probably 20 or more different countries. Today, about 50 standing armies actually issue one form or another of the AK-47 for their army. With that in mind, you can well imagine how that sort of lays the groundwork of where we are here today. You might wonder why we have AK parts kits and how we can actually do this. Well, back in the early 80s, you recall the Iron Curtain falling. President Reagan was instrumental in doing that. Well, now you have all these formerly Soviet countries, Romania and Hungary and Yugoslavia and all these countries that are now out from under the umbrella of the Soviet Union. And they're needing some cash. And they don't really have that much. They don't really have an infrastructure for making things and shipping things and exporting stuff and getting cash in. But they do have a huge supply of arms and ammunition. Well, why don't we just sell that stuff? Well, they did, and they sold it all over the world. They sold caches of weapons to anybody that wanted to buy it. But they found out that they couldn't sell those to these folks here in America because we had laws that kept them from doing that. So what are they going to do? They've got these tons of things. America is obviously the largest buyer of stuff like that, the largest market in the world. What are we going to do about it? So somebody probably had this huge light bulb that came up on over their head and said, hey, what if we cut them all up and sold them to those dumb Americans? You think maybe they'd buy them to cut up? Well, I don't know. Let's try it. So they tried it. And us dumb Americans did buy the kits all cut up. So about we've been probably in the mid-'80s, the country started being flooded with all sorts of parts kits, not only AK-47s, but any kind of gun that you can think of from World War II. Matter of fact, MP-40s, a lot of the German weapons were gone. We even saw a bunch of Thompson submachine guns come in. A lot of that stuff came into the country to help line the coffers of these third world countries or these former Soviet countries. Well, all these parts kits started coming in, and we didn't really know what to do with them because it was kind of new. We didn't have an opportunity. We hadn't ever had that before. But in addition to the guns that came in, we also had a huge supply of cheap ammo that came in with them. They had these huge stockpiles of ammo. Ammo for these AK-47s was selling at the time for probably $60 a thousand, $60, $70 a thousand. And today it's way up over $200 a thousand. So all that ammo came in. All those gun parts came in. So what do you think us resourceful gun folks did in the meantime? Well, we figured out how to put them back together. And we did it in a legal way. And during that period of time, it was back when the Internet was beginning to gain some legs, and ordinary people could actually use the Internet and communicate on that. So we had gun parts kits coming in, we had cheap ammo coming in, and now we have this new communication tool that helps us all communicate together. So one guy tells this guy, I did this and I did that, and we start these forums up, and pretty much within a short period of time, we had a good set steps of procedure on how to put these machines back together and make them function. In addition to that, some of the very first folks had to pretty much make their parts and additional pieces however they could. But an entire industry, a cottage industry of AK-47 suppliers sprang up to provide the tools and the accessories and the extra parts that you needed. So it was just a matter at that point, and that's kind of where we are today, it was just a matter of, at that point, of collecting all the parts, collecting the tools, a few steps of procedures that you find on the Internet, and voila, in about 12 hours, you can have a machine, or not a machine gun, but an AK-47 made in your basement. So that's kind of the history of the gun. One of the things that we want to touch on next is the legality of it, and this is fairly important. It's not illegal to build one, but you can build one that is illegal. I want to quote a couple of laws here, and kind of bear with me as I go through this. Some of this politician speak is a little difficult to get through sometimes. Back in 1968, there was a law passed just after President Kennedy was shot called the Gun Control Act of 1968, and that's been our major law that has supervised gun commerce since then. Prior to 1968, you could actually buy and sell any kind of gun pretty much through the mail that you wanted. Anybody could buy one. Since 1968, that set up the regulations and the rules where you have to have dealers, and only dealers can transact across state line commerce and so forth. But the question is, is it legal to assemble one of these? And the answer is, per provisions of the Gun Control Act of 1968, Section 18, United States Code, Chapter 44, an unlicensed individual may make a firearm as defined in the GCA for his own personal use, but not for sale or distribution. What that means is you can't make one of these things with the intention of selling it. If you want to make one, fine, you can make one, you can make 10, you can make a dozen of them, but don't do it in anticipation of selling it. It goes on to say, any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed or may be readily converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. So that means an entire gun is covered under this regulation. B, also the frames and or receivers of any such weapon. So now we know that the guns themselves are controlled under the Gun Control Act 1968, and also the frames or receivers. And we're fixing to look at one of those here just in a minute. We also want to make sure that we know what the term machine gun is. A lot of times in the media it's reported one way and it's reported another, and they really don't know their asses from a hole in the ground. So we're going to tell you what the law says as far as a machine gun. The term is any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can readily be restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. This term shall also include the frame or receiver of any such weapon, any part designed and intended solely and exclusively, or combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, and any combination of parts which a machine gun can be assembled if such parts are in the possession or under the control of a person. So if you actually have not put a machine gun together, but you have the parts to put one together, you're just as guilty as if you're outside shooting it. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure we don't do when we do any of this. If some of you guys are from this area, you may remember about 7 or 8 years ago, a fellow by the name of Mark Lancaster. He was a minister of music in Mount Juliet at the Green Hill Baptist Church. And he liked all these old World War II guns. And at that time, he was actually prior to that, he didn't have enough money to buy real ones or ones that were already put together, so he bought all these parts kits. He bought MP40s and he bought some Sten guns. I mean, he had about 12 or 15 of them. And he put them all together, which was fine. Unfortunately, he didn't read this little part of the law that says you can't make them into machine guns, because he did. And everything was going along just fine until he sort of got crossways with somebody in his congregation, and they made an anonymous tip to the BATF. They paid him a visit, and he found himself in jail. And it went on for about 2 years. He pled not guilty to the case, but he was convicted because they found a Sten gun in his possession that he had manufactured. It was a full auto weapon. They took him to jail. He served time in the federal penitentiary. The fine for that is minimum $10,000, maximum of 10 years in jail. He only spent about a year in jail. He thought he was going to get off for free because he wasn't actually going to be doing anything bad with this gun. He was just making it for his own personal fun use. Well, they didn't see it that way. So he served time in jail. We are not going to be building anything today that's going to put us in jail. But we just need to make sure we follow the rules when we do so. All right, one other thing that we want to talk about here on that goes into the guns that we're actually going to be talking about making. Also under the CFRs, no person shall assemble a semi-automatic rifle or any shotgun using more than 10 imported parts. Imported parts listed in paragraph C of this document. These documents are on the website, as a matter of fact, and we'll give you an address for those a little bit later on. If the assembled firearms are prohibited from importing under Section 925, subsection D, Part 3, as being not particularly suitable or readily adaptable to sporting purposes. I wonder what sporting purposes would be. I wonder what would be sporting purposes. Well, let's see if they don't describe that over here. As a result of 1989 study by the U.S. Treasury Department regarding the importability of certain firearms, an import ban was placed on military-style firearms. Now, that's complete guns, that's not kits. This ban included not only military-type firearms, but also extended to firearms with certain features that were considered to be non-sporting. Among such non-sporting features were the ability to accept detachable magazines, folding telescoping stocks, separate pistol grips, and the ability to accept a bayonet, flash hider, flash suppressor, bipods, grenade launchers, and night sights. Basically, all the fun stuff is what they decided to cut out. But more specifically related to the parts kits, foreign parts kits that are sold through commercial means are usually cut-up machine guns, such as Russian AK-47 types, British Stens, and so forth. Generally, an acceptable semi-automatic copy of a machine gun is one that has been significantly redesigned. The receiver must be incapable of accepting the original fire control components that are designed to permit full automatic fire. The method of operation should employ a closed bolt firing design and incorporates an inertia-type firing pin within the bolt body. That's where Mr. Lancaster goofed up right off the beginning. He rebuilt the Sten gun with an open bolt configuration, which is definitely a no-no. He should have known better than that. So, an acceptably redesigned semi-automatic copy of a non-sporting firearm, which is what we're going to be doing, must be limited to using less than 10 of the imported parts. Otherwise, it is considered to be assembled into a non-sporting configuration. Okay, so what does all that tell us? It says that some moronic bureaucrat, in his infinite wisdom, has classified one gun as more evil than another gun simply because it has a pistol grip or a flash hider or a detachable magazine. Because as this fellow over here said, why can't we go deer hunting with one? Well, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't. But we still must abide by the 922R rulings, which require that we have a certain amount of U.S.-made parts. It also means that we must throw away perfectly good components that come with our kits and substitute those with parts made here in the U.S. In this particular kit, we have a pistol grip and a flash hider that came from Romania, which is where this kit came from. But these two parts make this kit very evil. It makes it non-sporting. So what we have to do is we have to buy this flash hider, and we have to buy this pistol grip, which make it no longer evil. Okay? So it's kind of dumb, but we've got to do something to make sure we don't have more than 10 imported parts in the weapon that we build. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish that. That's per gun. No, you actually have to have on each gun, you have to have no more than 10 imported parts. And there's a lot of different parts that you can swap out, not just these. These are probably the least expensive ones you can do. But my point is, we got stupid people in Washington, D.C., and this is an example of that. It just kind of irritates me, if you can tell. Okay, let me see where we are on this. Evil guns. We're finished up with evil guns here. Now that we know we can make one legally, the other thing, too, when you get these kits in, about half the time they come with the full auto parts. You just throw those things away. You don't even need them hanging around. You can throw them away. They aren't going to do you any good. Actually, there has to be, these are the receivers that we make. There actually has to be an additional hole put in these at a particular point to be able to make those full auto parts work anyhow. So if you had those and somebody asked you questions about it, they wouldn't fall under the provision that you have all the parts capable of making one, because you wouldn't be able to utilize them in the type of receivers that we make. So it's not possible to get in trouble for that. But you still should just throw them away. There's really no reason for you to have them. Okay, so now you may be asking yourself, how do you know if making an open source AK-47 is really for you? Well, that's a good question to ask, because I think some people that get into it find out that it's a little more difficult than what they thought. This is not like going down to the store when you're a teenager or younger and buying a model of the 1969 Camaro that you liked. Little plastic kit, you poked out all the parts and you glued them together and you painted it up and it looked real pretty. It's not like doing that. You're actually physically making the parts from scratch. Not like just putting one together. If anybody here has built an AR-15, it's nothing like building an AR-15. Basically, they're like building one of the model cars. You buy all the parts, you drop them together, and they go off. These are significantly more involved than doing that. As a matter of fact, I haven't been able to put one together, making my own receivers, any quicker than about 12 hours, plus another 3 or 4 hours for finishing. So you've got to be fairly well committed to decide if you want to do this. It does require some skill with hand tools. You've got to be able to use a screwdriver and a file and a hammer and Band-Aids and so forth. You're going to have some tools. A bench vise is nice. We've got this press over here to use for making the receivers. When I went through and did all this, I went through with the intention of making several. And so I went through and made up some tools, and I've got a selection of those here on the table if you want to come up later and look at those. But you don't have to have all these tools to make one. You can get by with a lot of less stuff, and if you read some of the forums on the internet that I have referenced on the information that's on the website, you'll be able to see what it takes to do. Some people do some pretty interesting things with some very rudimentary tools, and this thing comes out. That's kind of the neat thing about an AK-47. It doesn't take rocket science to make one. It doesn't take a machine shop to make one. You can hack one out in your basement fairly simply if you're willing to take the time and all the tedious work that goes into one. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of tedious detail. And really, when you get the gun finished, the time that you took and the detail that you spent really shows up in the final product. If you're just wanting an AK-47, say, well, I'd like to have one of those just to have. Well, that's probably not for you. You can go down to the gun store or to the gun show and probably pick one up like any of these up here for about $500. And that would probably be your best way to do that. If, on the other hand, you're more interested in the no serial number and the no paperwork and just being able to do one and learn the gun from one end to the other and feel part of it, then it's probably for you. But just for having one, it's probably not worth your effort. Okay, we know the laws. We think we want to do one. You're committed. Now what have you got to have to be able to make one of these things work? First thing you need to ask yourself is there's basic two methods of putting one together. All the ones that we have manufactured up here are done with the rivet method. Matter of fact, let's see. Dr. Buttstock, I think we need to get you going over there.
All right.
I think I skipped, yeah. Right there's where we were supposed to get you going. I'll give you a quick introduction to what he's going to be doing. Remember when we read the part in the law about how a gun can be a complete item or it can be just a frame or receiver? Well, he's fixing to make a gun over here. Actually, he's only going to be making the receiver. But as far as the law is concerned, he's making that complete gun. And what he's making is that when you get the kits, they come in, they look like this. There's a big section that goes between these two that's missing. ATF requires that the guns be chopped up into 3 nice sections. And so what we're actually making is the part that puts all that back together. These parts here. And Mr. Buttstock over there is going to be working on how to do that. One of the things I'll say about this press is that you don't have to have one of those presses to do that. It is nice. It is handy. You can also buy, one of the other ways to put the guns together, you can also buy receivers already done. But that's just like buying a full gun. You have to go through the same background check, same paperwork, same everything else. The jig that we have over there is one that I purchased specifically for this task. There's companies out there that make those. They're fairly expensive, but the other thing that's kind of neat is there are those jigs floating around out there on the internet. If you don't want to buy a jig, you're just going to make a couple of guns. You're going to have a little party at your house, and you guys, friends are going to come over and decide to make 4 or 5 of these. You can get on the list, and one day that jig will show up at your door. And you put your flats in it. What he's working from is this piece of metal. It's basically, as far as the law is concerned, just a scrap piece of metal. It does have all the right holes in it. It does have all the right cutouts, but it's just a flat piece of metal. The process that he's doing over there takes this flat piece of metal and converts it into a fairly completed receiver, which does require some additional work, but it's not hard for him to do. Anyway, back on the internet deal, you can get on the list on one of the internet forums, and in probably a couple of months it'll show up at your door. You take it and bend your flats, see who's next on the list, ship it back out to them. That bending jig has been going around the country for 4 years now. So it's out there. you can save some money by doing that. I kind of wanted to have my own because of some time constraints, but at any rate, that's what they're going to be doing over there. You do. You buy these. That cottage industry that sprung up sells these things. They're about $15. 12, $15. That's all they are. Yep. These are all laser cut. I mean, when we started out with this process, people were taking flat pieces of metal, bending it, drilling their own holes. I mean, they looked pretty beat up. But now with this industry or this hobby has sort of matured quite a bit. And it's kind of on the waning side because as of 2006, the BATF reinterpreted the law, and no more kits can come in, or at least no kits with complete barrels on them. So that's kind of dried the kits up. But they're still available through private sources, but typically in the past they were sold through distributors. But yes, these are all laser cut. This particular brand is probably the best. You fold one of these, put it together, you can't beat it. There's never any issues with it not working right. It always works right. You don't really have to make a whole lot, but this is really the only thing that you have to make. It requires a lot of fitting because in your kit, all the other parts are included. Okay? Question over here? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. You don't even see too many milled kits coming in anymore. Probably not, because these are so easy. I don't know that there's a whole lot of significant difference between a milled kit and a stamped kit as far as function and why you would want one other than you just want a milled kit, but you just don't see those very often. The original AK-47 was developed as a stamping, but in the manufacturing process at that time, back in the 40s, they didn't have the machinery that really could stamp these things out in a good way. They had a lot of rejects, but they did have a lot of machining equipment back then where they used to make the old Mosin-Nagant rifles and things, so they converted those over to making milled ones. So they reconverted this to a milled gun, and they made those for a number of years, and then they came out with the AKM, which means improved version, went back to the stampings so they could turn them out faster. Once they got the equipment available, they could actually do that. It was just basically a manufacturing process. They didn't know that much about stamping. You know, back until the very end of World War II, there were no stamped guns. Everything was a machined out piece of metal. They were all pieces of artwork in reality. It wasn't until the very end of World War II when the Germans came out with the MG42s, MG43s, all those stamped out guns, and these, that we actually began seeing a lot of stamped out firearms as far as the market was concerned. Okay. How's it going over there, guys? Okay. You're going good. Okay. All right, where were we here? Angels are getting close, I can see. I am already beginning to see some stars going around the top of that, because he's actually taking a piece of scrap metal and turning it into a gun. So there's got to be angels singing at some point here. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir, they're warming up. I can tell. Let's see. When you get one of your kits, you have to take it all apart. They come just like this, which means that all the parts, all the pieces of the old receiver stub are still on there. All the parts that you don't need are still on there. So you've got to sort of scavenge out the pieces that you really need. Before you can do that, you have to decide what kind of build method you want to build. You've got basically two, either a rivet build method or you can have a screw build method. All the guns up here are rivet build. That's the original style method. It is sturdy. It looks original. It does require a few more tools. If, on the other hand, you don't have a lot of tools and you don't care whether it looks like it's got screws in it or not, you can build a screw together gun. And that just means rather than punching out the rivets that used to be there, you drill them and tap them and then put some little button head screws. And all those screws and stuff are available out there through this cottage industry. So those kind of go together a little bit faster. When you're doing a rivet build gun, you have to actually punch the barrel out of the trunnion so you can access the rivets and put those back. When you're doing a screw build, you don't have to do any of that. So it's a lot quicker to do. I have not built any of the screw guns. A lot of folks like them. They say they're just as good. I have no doubt that they're not. It just depends on how you want to do that. The other thing that you can do is you can actually build one of these into a pistol. Some people do that. You don't have to have any of the 922R parts if you do a pistol build. You also don't have to, the only thing you got to be sure of is that you don't have any way for a buttstock to be attached to it. That's a requirement. And also you cannot have a pistol grip on the front end of the pistol. That's a no-no as far as the law is concerned. It must be, for example, this would not be a good pistol build because it's got this stock up here. You can't do that. That's illegal to do that. Okay. When buying a kit, and you have to know which of those kind of builds you're going to screw a rivet before you demill, because if you're demilling for a rivet build, you got to punch all the old rivets out. If you're building for a screw build, you leave them in there. Okay, you don't punch those out because you're going to be drilling into those and tapping those to put the screws in. Next step is the picking out a kit. Most of the kits available out there today are going to be these Romanian G kits, which are a significant portion of all these up here on this table. There's kits from Romania, from Yugoslavia, from Poland, from Bulgaria, from Hungary, any place you can think of. Most all the kits are in pretty good shape. The Yugoslavian ones you need to sort of watch out for because they were well used. They used corrosive ammo back then, so a lot of the times the bores are dark and shot out, so you got to be careful of those. The Romanians, I have had good success with. Some people say they don't like them. They have all chrome line bores. Usually those guns are brand new. Those guns were made back in the 80s. They were put in a warehouse, and they didn't see the light of day till they cut them up and shipped them back over to us. So those things are all brand new. Matter of fact, a couple of the kits that I had here even still had the paper going through the barrel where they were originally put in long-term storage. So those are good kits to have. In addition to that, you're going to need a new flash hider of some sort. You're going to need a fire control group. This is what replaces the full auto parts that comes with your kit. This is what we make sure that we use so we don't have to worry about any kind of problem with being full automatic. You'll have to have a center support piece, and if you're going to do a rivet build, you have to have a sack full of rivets, or you have to have a sack full of screws, depending on which one of those you're going to do. The only thing that you don't have is you don't have a place in which to put those parts. Right. Exactly. Okay. And even if you had a receiver, you still wouldn't have all the parts because it doesn't have the hole in it to put those parts in. You can't actually mount those parts in here. Okay. Let's see. The cost of the kits, if we could have foretold the future, we could all been sitting here and been millionaires today, because these kits originally came in the country for around $50 or $60. Most of the kits I bought, I paid $100 for them. Today, you can't find one for less than about $175 or $200. And the reason being is that law that reinterpretation of the law that the ATF did back in 2006, where they said, we've decided that there's too many of these things being built, that we're going to reinterpret this importation law and say that you can't bring any imported barrels into the country. So now any kind of a kit that you get not only has the receiver demilled, but they also have to have torch cuts through two sections of the barrel. So that means that any of the new kits they bring in requires that you have a virgin barrel put in. There's a lot of headaches with doing that, so it's not worth even fooling with. The price just went astronomically high when they proposed that law and reinterpreted that law. But, pardon me? Of the ones with the torched barrels, I don't. With the torch. Now, I've got these kits up here which were pre-ban or pre-2006, but you can still buy these kits online. You can't find them at a distributorship where they've got a whole truckload of them, but you can find individuals selling these things all the time. So the only thing that you got to watch out for is make sure. One of the things, for example, this is a Hungarian AMD 65, and it looks like a great kit, and it has a folding stock, and it's a nice gun. The problem is the barrel is not long enough to be legal once you get it built. Rifle barrels must be at least 16 inches long, and this one would only be about 14. So if you built this gun from a kit into a real gun, you would be breaking the law, and you will get punished almost as severely as if it were a full-auto type weapon. So what they do, if you want to build this into one, the cottage industry has made extra long flash hiders that you can put on there, and as long as you permanently attach that, either through soldering or through welding.
Anybody got a cigarette? I think I just made a gun.
I didn't hear the chorus over there. What happened? So, at any rate, just be careful with the barrel lengths on those. Make sure you follow the guidelines relative to that. Let's see. Tools. Like I say, you're probably going to spend about $200 on the kit itself these days. Well, of course, you can spend more than that. If you wanted to have a folding stock kit like some of these others, those get kind of pricey. As far as additional items, all these other pieces that you'll need, the fire control group, the other pieces, probably going to run you somewhere, including the flat, going to run you somewhere between $75 and $100. If you don't want to fool with making your own, of course, you can buy pre-made receivers. They also have some that are pre-bent, but they don't have all the holes drilled in them. They call those actually don't have a legal classification, but they're called 80% receivers. That's what these are called. These are called 80% flats. I mean, they're only 80% finished. No serial number. No. And there's really no, that's certainly perfectly legal to do that. You don't have to have a serial number on that. They do recommend, and one of the law states here, that individuals manufacturing sporting-type firearms, you know we've just made that into sporting because we put our own U.S.-made pistol grip and flash hider on there, who do not hold a federal firearms license. However, we suggest that the manufacturer at least identify the firearm with a serial number as a safeguard in the event the firearm is lost or stolen. So they don't even require you to put a serial number on it. They suggest that you do put your own personal serial number on there if you're planning on selling it. So they actually say we can sell these, even though they told us a little earlier that you can't make one with the intention of selling it. So that's sort of a gray area in the law. How's it coming off over there?
Got a little bounce back.
Really? Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that'd be all right. That'll be all right. It just about got that one knocked out, I guess. The steps of procedure of doing this, I have an 84-step PDF on the website that you can look at. It's the steps that I go through, but it's like a lot of things. You know, you can go through a lot of different steps and get the same outcome. It happens to be the steps that I use because it relates to the tools that I have to do that. If you don't have certain tools, then you might want to use a little different set of steps. But there's a lot of information out there on how to do that. The first thing that you do is a demill. You can do that yourself. You can send it off. There's guys out there that'll, for $50, they'll demill it. Some people say that the demilling process, where you have to grind off these rivets and punch them out with a punch out the barrel, all that sort of thing, is probably the most difficult part of the whole process, and I would agree. It takes about 2 hours to do that, hour and a half, 2 hours, and it is sort of a pain. You got to use a hammer and a punch, and some of the parts are difficult to do. Once you get the parts demilled and get all the parts out of there scavenged that you need, you bend the flat just like we did over here. You trim the top rails. We have there are companies that make gauges that will help you scribe lines on your flat, so you can trim those fairly easily. I happen to make these because they were fairly simple to make. The first gun that I made, which was this one here, I didn't really use any pre-made tools. I made this one all. It took me about 6 months to make it, simply because I was trying to develop the steps of procedure to make one. So I used a lot of hand tools to make this. But it turned out being a pretty nice gun, and it shoots very well as well. This was probably the last gun that we've made. When you look at them closely, you can see some of the refinements and the techniques because we had better tools to do that with. This one has not been finished yet. When you get it done, the receiver looks silver like this. You can either paint it, or I prefer parkerizing, which is more of an original type finish. I kind of got set up to do that. It's not that big a deal. This one is my son's gun. He sort of wanted to trick his out, and it's got the fancy sight on it and hand guards and the Chinese 75-round drum magazine, and so it looks pretty good. And it shoots very well as well. But all these are made on home-built receivers and home-built plans. I brought these two guns just to show, because these also were built from kits. This is an FAL. It's actually contemporary to the AK-47. This was the AK-47 was the Warsaw packed gun. You know, it was the gun of all the commies, whereas this has been called the right arm of the free world. It actually was built, manufactured, and developed about the same, just after the AK-47, and was delivered to all the NATO countries. So these two guns actually fought against one another, and both of the guns are still in service in some parts of the world today. This happens to be a U.S. version of a Browning Model 1919 A6, which is classified as a light machine gun. This particular gun was actually originally sent, or the parts, the gun was sent to Israel on an exchange program back in the 50s, and when they got done with it, they hung on to them, and then once everybody started making parts kits to send out, they shipped out those things back and sold them back to us as parts kits. And so this was an American gun that was shipped overseas, chopped up, sent back over here, and then we were nice enough to build it. I bought this kit about 5 or 6 years ago, not knowing anything about how to build a kit or anything thinking about building a kit, but I knew this particular gun. A buddy of mine actually had one that was an original gun, full auto, completely registered, all legal. And I remember them being very boxy and not a lot of machine work type things. And so I thought, I bet maybe I might be able to make that thing work. I'm going to buy that kit and maybe make it into a blank gun or something. And so I bought the kit and didn't look at it for a couple, 3 years, and then happened to type in on the computer 1919 one day, and dang, there was a forum that came up and said how to build these things back together again. I thought, wow, I'm going to do this. So I got my kit back out. What they classify on these as being the actual gun is the right side plate. It's almost always the right side plate that they actually consider the gun. So when I got it, the right side plate was gone. Everything else was there. The bipod and the stock here are actually Israeli parts. Those aren't actually U.S. parts. Those were Israeli parts. The way those go back together is pretty neat. Actually, I traveled down to a guy's place in Florida to build this one because I didn't have any experience in doing those. But the way they keep these actually use the same parts that the machine gun uses. But the way they keep them from being full auto or keep them from being illegal is that this right side plate, when it's manufactured, is made thicker than the original, so that no longer will the original parts go back into the gun. So you take the original parts, have those machined thinner, have a thicker side plate put on it, so that any original full auto parts will not go back into it. So it can only be fired in semi-automatic mode. 8-ounce receiver, great. Doesn't take long to make one. If you got the right tools, and the goes there, and then this piece kind of goes up like that. Now, all that's left is to take and you got to do a good bit of trimming and metal work on that to get it finished up. But you know, you're a good bit on your way there. There is not. There is not. Now, you can buy one that's already registered. You can have it transferred to you. But as of 1985 or 86, they passed a law that does not allow any newly manufactured guns after that, any machine guns manufactured after 1985, to be transferred to an individual. That's the reason machine guns have gone in price. Nope. You can't do it anyway. You'll be just like Mr. Lancaster. No, it comes in the kit. It comes in the kit. That's probably the only part that you really have to make from scratch. Is that everything else you either get in the kit or you buy as replacement parts from the marketplace. I show them the video, and this is actually kind of a hokey video, but it's one that has a. Yeah, this was model XM1.
One thing you need to know, this is going to come up, and this is called, we call these a code name. We knew we were going to be talking about these for 2 or 3 years on cell phones, at work, on email, at church. So we came up with a code name so that it didn't freak people out, and we called them ham radios. It caught on so well that it became, in my mind, synonymous, ham radio, AK-47. Somebody at church heard us talking about ham radios, and somebody said, hey, did you know that Scott Northcutt. I think somebody in here knows Scott Northcutt. Anyway, Scott Northcutt's, he's into ham radios. And I was like, you're kidding. And I pictured him with an AK-47 wailing away on it. And then I had to think, oh, yeah, wait, that's in the real world, ham radio is a thing that you talk on. But we developed a whole glossary of terms. Transmitting was firing them. The magazines were batteries. And one quick story, I know we're running out of time, but you got to be careful about this personal PR when you're putting one of these together. I'd ordered 5 magazines, 15 came by mistake, and I talked to Pistol Grip, and he said, well, send 10 of them back, but look through all of them and pick you out the 5 best before you send 10 back. Well, I got the package at work, so on my desk I'd laid out 15 AK-47 magazines, and my secretary walked in and said, what's this? And the first thing that occurred to me was the truth. She is a former Catholic. She's now a Tibetan Buddhist, follows the Dalai Lama. And I said, oh, these are magazines to an AK-47. These are 30-round magazines. Anyway, when she turned white and backed out of my office, I knew that I had said something insensitive. Okay, so let me get the video going.
We've only had one that's going to do it, and it was due to personal craftsmanship. The 7.62 by 39 round is a fairly powerful round. It'll put a hole right through a disc brake disc, as well as that piece of angle right there. All right. Dr. Buttstock, I love that music you put on there.
I meant to tell you what the song was before we started. We played that song when the shipment of ham radios came in, and Pistol Grip invited us over and said, we're going to divvy up the kits. Come over and look at them. So we played this music. This song was written to commemorate the Easter Rising. Is anybody familiar with the Easter Rising? 1916, a citizen army in Ireland took on the British Empire and held some government buildings for about a week. About 1,000 men did, and the British government, with their long-range guns, that's what the song says, overtook them. The leaders were executed. But to me, it kind of symbolized what the spirit of this was: citizen soldiers. What's embodied in the American spirit of we'll figure this out one way or another. And we recognize a communist gun. We recognize the qualities of an extraordinarily good design and adapted it for our own use. So that's the story.
I don't know. We might ought to bring our ham radios. Any other questions? No, it's not me, I'm afraid. Any other questions before we get yes, sir? I don't know. I didn't know really anything about it. I did see it on the calendar, but I hadn't heard anything about it. I really haven't had a chance I would like. It's hard to do with the iron sights. I'd like to get a scope on one and see. Most people say it's somewhere around 6 inches. They were designed to be effective to 300 yards. The ammo itself is effective to about 400, but they were made for man-sized targets. Yes, there is a website. We just posted all this information up today. Hacker Consortium /AK47, all capitals. We've got the steps of procedure. We've got the laws I mentioned, pretty much. And there's also a HTML file there with all kinds of links on it to all these forums, and you can find out anything you want to know there. The people on those forums are just terrific. Yes, sir. There's not a specific place. Some of them will be here on the side. Some of them will be up under the bottom. There's really no particular thing. If you look at these guns, they always had the serial number on the trunnion, which is this piece here in the front. Oh yes, it would be. It certainly would be. Right. If you're talking about just buying the parts, you're going to spend $200 for a kit. You're going to spend another $100 for your parts. That would not include any kind of tools and things that you might want to accumulate. So you're talking $300. That's what I said earlier. If you just want a gun, it's cheaper to go buy a $500 one already put together. If, on the other hand, you want to build it and be part of it, then that's a whole different story. Used to, you could probably build one for $175, but it's going to be closer to $300 today. And that is if you don't want an underfolder or some fancy thing like that. No, the receiver is all I make. All the other parts, the trigger and all that stuff that you have to have, you buy those across the internet or any place. You can find them at the gun shows. Yes, sir. Okay, great, great. Back in the back. Most people that talk about the screw build, and I've not done one, but most people talk about it, they will tell you there's no difference whatsoever. They think they're just as good or actually better than the rivet build. So I don't think you'll have trouble with that. A lot of times one of the things that you have to do is there are the upper rails are formed when you form them on the press. There's also some lower rails, and those have to be welded in some fashion. On the screw builds, they will normally screw those in and put epoxy on them, and apparently that holds up pretty well. Matter of fact, there's one guy on the internet, and he actually put one whole gun together and just glued it together, and said he'd fired about 100 rounds through it. It was doing fine. So, who knows? Yes, sir. Well, I haven't. These are actually I've got one other one that I have done that's not out here, and those are the only ones that I've done. The law says that you're not supposed to sell them, but then again, we read part of the law that says if you do sell them, you should put a serial number on them. So we really don't know how. And I know people who have sold them. So if you don't want to be in the situation where you are making them to sell. They're always for your personal use. They do make good Christmas, and I've heard of people who are going to be doing that, yes. Actually, the way this actually works is the person that bends the receiver is actually doing the making part. Everything after that is just gravy. So the actual bending of that flat is the only making part. So that receiver belongs to you, bud. You owe me for that. Yes, sir? A closer look? Yeah. Yeah, when we get done, you come up, look at all this stuff, ask more questions if we've got time from our next speaker. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, repeat, please. I think the line would fall, and this would just be from a layman's point of view, is if you bought a bunch of them and decided, I could build these things and I could sell them and make some money off of them. And that's what you started to do. I think if you build one and then you say, I really don't need this thing, I just want to get rid of it, I think you'll be okay on doing that. I have seen that before, yes. Probably depends on who you're selling it to and who all finds out about it and that sort of thing. Yes. Well, that's a good question because there are a couple of different things that could make the answer different. If they were it depends on what kind of a form those particular weapons were initially registered on. Because at that time, before the ban in 1985, there were two classifications of weapons, normally transferable weapons, and then there were also the special weapons that were only for law enforcement use. A regular dealer could own those, could have those, but he was not able to sell those out unless it was to a law enforcement agency. So the answer to your question would be different based on what type of gun that is. If it was a standard gun on what I think is a Form 4, then those can be passed down from family member to family member. And it may be that way on the others as well. Yeah, you can't get rid of them. You got to hang on to them. No, you would not have to do that. I don't believe you'd have to. I'm pretty sure, because Class 3 firearms requires an annual payment of a tax, or it has to be renewed annually or every 3 years. So, and that would be quite expensive. I know that there was a lot of people that did that. They bought, they became a Class 3 dealer. They bought a bunch of machine guns, let their license expire, kept the guns, which was perfectly legal. Nobody liked to talk about that from ATF, but it was perfectly legal to do that. How those get transferred from down the line may be something that you would want to ask somebody else. Yes, sir. You just pay it down the line? Yes. Well, I was thinking he was talking about inheriting it down through the family. I don't think inheritance you have to pay a tax, do you? Okay. Over here. As far as the machine guns are concerned, I have read some things about being a corporation or in some kind of a trust situation. I don't know all the details about that. I haven't really know it, but I have read some stuff about that. Yes. Nope. Well, they're going to come out to your house and get it. Doesn't matter. There was an amnesty in 1968 where if you had Uncle Ed's gun in your trunk in 1968 and you found it and you wanted to keep it, you could legally register it under the amnesty, no tax. Yes. And they've been trying to bring an amnesty back, but it ain't going to happen, especially if the election coming up, it ain't going to happen. Okay. Are we done? If y'all want to come up and look at any of this stuff, feel free to. Thank you for coming.